we can also speak to Mohammed Shehada in Copenhagen. He's the Chief of Communications at Euro-Mediterranean Human Rights Monitor. Mohammed, thank you for your time as always. Now, since the ceasefire in Gaza started, it's been described very much as being fragile, but it has lasted so far. Hamas is blaming Israel for violating it. Why would either side want to jeopardize it when there's so much at stake here?
That's a very good question. So basically, I've been here many times before. I lived in Gaza through 10 Israeli military operations or major assaults and 3 wars and 2 grand invasions. It's been Israeli policy that basically as soon as you sign a ceasefire deal and it's implemented, no one is going to care about the details, so you can do whatever you want. So after Operation Cast Lead in 2008, it was Israel's defense minister, Ehud Barak, who said this verbatim. He said, as soon as you sign a ceasefire, nobody's going to bother with the details. Back then, Israel agreed to lift the blockade on Gaza. The agreement was enforced, no blockade was lifted. So you see the same with Netanyahu, that when the ceasefire was enforced, Israel allowed only 30% of the fuel trucks that were supposed to go in and 70% of the food trucks that were supposed to go in. They killed close to 100 Gazans, 100 civilians throughout the Gaza Strip since the ceasefire was implemented, since it was enforced. And they sort of violated it systematically in every sense of the word, with the impression that Gazans would pressure Hamas to keep committing to this because they don't want the genocide to resume. So that was Israel's incentive. As soon as Hamas suspended the deal and suspended the release of hostages, basically Israeli media started blaming Netanyahu. So in Ma'arif, they said that Hamas did not violate the agreement. Israel did. In the New York Times, multiple Israeli officials said that Hamas's position was accurate and that Israel was the one violating the agreement. But yesterday, Netanyahu caved in under pressure from mediators, and he allowed 800 trucks into Gaza. There is 200 more than what is supposed to go in on a daily basis, and caravans started to roll in immediately. Israel has been banning those from entering for so many days.
Yeah, and that aid is so vital right now because, of course, people need places where they can have shelter, proper shelter. The tents they've been living in for so many months now, just not keeping up with the terrible weather in Gaza. With that aid coming through, can we expect any sort of proper housing or at least materials that will provide better shelter for Palestinians?
At least there would be temporary housing. That is the case with the caravans, 60,000 caravans, as well as 200,000 tents. That should provide an improvement to the situation that's there already, but it's still catastrophic. It still falls short of anything that is needed. Israel is banning construction material from going into Gaza in the first place. So no cement, no steel, as well as restricting the entry of necessary machinery, bulldozers and trucks that are needed to remove the rubble, to reopen streets, to sort of salvage basic infrastructure, water wells, water pumps, etc. So that was also another point of contention that mediators are trying to pressure Israel to comply with, the humanitarian clause in the ceasefire agreement.
And Mohammed, I'd just like to get your thoughts on what has been an eventful few days in the United States with regards to their position on Gaza. We also saw Jordan's King Abdullah in conversation with President Trump there, and he was saying that Jordan would take in 2,000 children from Gaza for medical treatment. What do you make of this at a time when the U.S. has proposed taking over Gaza for what many have described would be ethnic cleansing, forcing Palestinians to leave?
That's a very good point. So basically, it's not only ethnic cleansing. If Trump keeps insisting on emptying out Gaza and dispersing its population to multiple countries, that is genocide. It is basically destroying a group in whole or in part, preventing Palestinians from the ability to exist as a group. When you disperse them to multiple countries where they are forced to assimilate and become part of these societies, they are no longer Palestinians. They're just refugees that would be sort of swallowed in, and their identity is completely destroyed. At the same time, King Abdullah's gesture, I would say it was a smart move, because if you look at Gazans, they should not be looked at as cattle that is herded around and ethnically cleansed or moved from one area to another. But at the same time, Gazans should not be looked at as pickles in a jar that needs to be locked in permanently, in a permanent state of non-life, to preserve the Palestinian cause in brine. Gaza is basically, before October 7th, there was a need for some people there to migrate for work or for studies or humanitarian reasons or to seek medical treatment that was not allowed in Gaza. The ideal scenario would be for Israel's illegal occupation and illegal blockade to be lifted immediately. That is the only way Gaza can be restored back to its potential and its life. And problems with unemployment, acute humanitarian crises and catastrophes can be solved. But as long as that blockade is still there, and countries are unwilling and not pressuring Israel enough to remove it, there could be other ways to help. For instance, there is about 100,000 wounded Gazans from Israel's genocide. It's not complicity in ethnic cleansing if countries are willing to take some of them for treatment, conditioned on that they should be allowed to return to Gaza again. There's also about 150,000 university students and high school graduates. While Israel had wiped out Gaza's entire educational system, all universities in Gaza destroyed. So before October 7th, there were a lot of scholarships in the hundreds or even thousands for Gazan students. There should be a similar program where students are allowed to study elsewhere temporarily with a clear time frame, after which they're allowed to return. The problem is that Israel is saying anyone who leaves Gaza should compromise their Palestinian identity, should never be allowed to go back again. And that is ethnic cleansing, pure and simple.
Mohammed Shehada, always good to get your analysis. Thank you so much for speaking to us. He's the Chief of Communications at Euro-Mediterranean Human Rights Monitor.